Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome, and welcome to this episode all about the not self theme as your compass, as a body compass. And I often get asked, what do I think is the most important part of your human design chart? And this is a very loaded question. I've been asked this on quite a few podcast episodes when I'm talking about or teaching about human design, and I can answer this in a million different ways. But ultimately, if I really had to narrow it down to one piece, and it might not be what other people might answer this question like, but the way I see it in my experience, and I think this episode will explain why, I really believe it's the not self theme, at least starting out. And I want to kind of add to that a caveat here, because I think this can shift and change as you go through your own human design experiment and through your own human design journey. And as you get more fluent in the human design language and pieces, and you get more attuned to those in your body. But I think at least starting out, and as you're kind of getting attuned to how this shows up in your body, I think this is it. So as we kind of set the stage here for the not self theme, and what even is the not self theme? Your not self theme is kind of the sign that you are out of alignment with your design in the most simplest terms. And so the reason I say that I often think of this like a compass, like a body compass, is it's going to tell you where you're off course. So if we look at it through each of the human design types, manifestors, your not self theme is anger. For generators, it's frustration. For manifesting generators, it's also frustration, but it's more impatience than anything. So it's, for me, I always say it's like a combination of impatience and frustration. For projectors, it's bitterness. And for reflectors, it's disappointment. And I find a lot of times when we're tuning into this part of our charts that when we learn our not self theme, and it ends up being this constant judgment fest, like this constant way of judging ourselves. And I can say this from personal experience too, and just from the women I work with, that when we start to get really judgy about ourselves, about feeling it. It's like when you end up feeling these things, that you're not self-themed, then this whole thing compounds into this messy mess, because then you're frustrated about being frustrated, or you're bitter about being bitter, right? And so it turns into this whole compounded thing, and you kind of get stuck in it and sucked down into those feelings, rather than using it as a sort of diagnostic tool, and not as this way to shame ourselves into, oh, I've gotten myself out of alignment again, and this is showing up again, and why can't I get out of this? Your not self theme really is designed to be a diagnostic tool, this compass that I'm talking about, for you to understand, okay, where am I out of alignment? And when I was first starting out with my human design journey, this was really, I would say after learning about what it meant to be a manifesting generator, I would say this was the thing I really focused the most on, was my not self theme. It wasn't my strategy. It wasn't my authority. Those things are important, of course. But for me, it was just, can I recognize when I'm feeling my not self theme? Can I recognize when I'm feeling this frustration and impatience, and just kind of tune into that? Can I get curious about it? And can I, first and foremost, can I feel what it feels like in the body? But then can I kind of take this step back and take a bird's eye view of, okay, why am I feeling this frustration or impatience? Where am I being asked to look, to pivot, to kind of reassess and use it as an opportunity to redirect? And so this is why I want to bring you this today, because even if you are super far down into your human design experiment, to your human design journey, I challenge you to go back and look at this piece and approach your not self theme from this perspective. If you're new to this, this is a perfect place to start. And this is a perfect place to kind of get your feet wet. And like I said, this is probably the only thing that I worked with for a long time, was just looking at my not self theme. So if we start with looking at the not self theme, we want to look at why we're living in the not self theme in the first place. Like, why is this even showing up? Really and truly, it goes back to your undefined centers, kind of as these entry points. Your undefined centers are where the world has essentially written its own story in your body. It's where you've picked up all these pieces that weren't yours to carry, and you've kind of taken them on as your own. And so I feel like the not self theme is kind of this accumulation of living from those undefined centers over time. And it just kind of compounds. It's those things like people pleasing, improving and performing, the doing to show your worth, the overproductivity, all of those things. And all of that accumulates and it ends up you feeling you're not self-theme, and you're not feeling you're not self-theme is going to give you signs of that. There's also this patriarchal conditioning layer, which I have to bring up because everything I just listed, the people pleasing, the proving, the overproducing, all of that, all of those are patriarchal wounds. All of this is conditioning. Women essentially have been conditioned to override our authority and override any inkling of the not self-theme showing up on our body, to be agreeable, to be manageable, to be palatable, to be there's the whole good girl conditioning piece, which means that most women are chronically in their not self theme and the majority of the time, and they probably have been for decades. And I might be speaking to you, might be listening to this, and you might have been in your not self theme for most of your life, if not your entire life. Because if we think about it, we think about the conditioning of the patriarchy and how this shows up. What does society say about angry women? What does society say about bitter women? These aren't exactly emotions and feelings that we feel safe experiencing and recognizing within ourselves. What does patriarchy say about disappointment? The patriarchy really says that the only people we're allowed to disappoint is ourselves. And so it's almost like this natural state of being, this disappointment for my reflectors out there, rather than this diagnostic tool that tells us that something is out of alignment. It's just like, I expect to be disappointed because I'm supposed to sacrifice myself for everything I want and I need. And so disappointment is just kind of my constant state of being. So we get stuck in these not self themes because of the conditioning that we're born with, because of the conditioning from our open centers, and because of the patriarchal conditioning that tells us that it doesn't matter if we feel frustrated or angry or bitter or disappointed, because we're just supposed to be agreeable and stay the path, just kind of shove any of those things that we're feeling down and keep going. And when we're stuck in the not self theme, this is where your physical body starts to pick up this energetic misalignment. And for me, coming from my functional practitioner lens, this is where I'm looking for the connection between the energetic and the physical body. This is kind of where it all comes together, is where we're looking at where the not self theme has kind of gotten stuck and what part of the body is showing that. Now, there's a lot of places where it's going to show up in the body. And of course, there's nuance to this, especially depending on type. I have a whole episode about that, looking at how the most common chronic symptoms per human is on type. But I would say, looking at it from the lab, just majority speaking, there's the HPA axis dysregulation. That's your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And that's that line of communication between those three parts, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals, which essentially controls what your nervous system is doing, what your cortisol response is doing, which is in effect going to impact your estrogen, your progesterone, also your blood sugar and your thyroid. It's like this chain reaction. So we're looking at that, what it's doing to your HPA axis. We're looking at your cortisol pattern. We're looking for this hypervigilance, this nervous system hypervigilance. This is all happening in your physiology. We're looking for hormonal dysregulation and gut dysregulation. The not self theme is kind of this chronic stress signal because, like I said, most women have been conditioned to just override these feelings. And when we can use the not self theme as a signal, we can recognize okay, that's why my physical body is feeling XYZ. So we can use the not self theme as this chronic stress signal that indicates where we're out of alignment, and it can get us into this chronically stressed state, but it can also get us out of it. So if we can understand the not self theme, how it feels in the body, how it shows up in the body, that's when we can use it to get out of it so we don't get stuck in this place of chronic stress and this dysregulation. And this comes from getting into your body first and foremost. This is the core piece of this that we have to understand, because you really can't use the not self theme if you're not used to being in your body. This isn't something that you can think your way out of. This is not some mindset or cognitive strategy that we can do this. This is a body signal. So you have to first get into your body. And the first step for you is first getting comfortable being in your body. If that's something that you're not used to doing, is feeling your body. And then understanding, where does the frustration or the impatience or the anger or the bitterness or the disappointment, whatever your not self theme is, where does it actually live in the body? So if I can just walk you through a quick exercise here, and even if you're multitasking, you can still do this and you could probably still figure it out. I feel like it'll be more effective if you're still quiet place, but you can still do this just to check in with your body. If you could think of right now, first, I want you to go back. So depending on your type, I'll say them again for you. Depending on your type, I want you to check in with I want you to hold your not self theme in your mind. So for manifestors, that's anger. For generators, it's frustration. Manifesting generators, it's this frustration and impatience. For projectors, it's bitterness. And for reflectors, it's disappointment. So if you can hold that in your mind and just think of what your not self theme is, I want you to feel into a time most recently. I mean, it has to have been within the last couple of weeks because we feel these things all the time. If you can think of a time where you felt this not self theme, when it showed up in your body, I want you to go into a recent moment of that, a recent moment of the frustration or the anger, the bitterness, the disappointment. And I want you to think of it in your head, in your mind. And I want you to go back to that situation that caused that not self theme to show up. You don't need to analyze the situation. You don't need to go back to telling yourself stories about the situation, but just remember the situation. And then I want you to feel those feelings. I want you to feel the anger or the frustration with the impatience or the bitterness or the disappointment. I want you to really feel it in your body, that feeling you felt in the moment, or maybe it was like right after the moment. Feel it in your body. And I want you to notice it. We're not analyzing it. We're not judging it. We're just noticing it because I want you to feel where you feel it. Where in your body do you feel that feeling? Maybe it's your chest, maybe it's your gut, maybe it's your jaw, your throat, your shoulders, your womb space, whatever it is. I want you to feel where you feel it. Feel it in your body. And it is as simple as that. You just did a somatic exercise to learn where the not self theme comes up in your body. Now, this isn't to say it can't show up in other places and other situations, but for our purposes here, this is where I want you to focus your attention on. And so when you feel that feeling come up in that part of the body, a few questions to ask yourself when that first you're recognizing that's where my not self theme is going to arise. And then I want you to ask yourself a couple questions. Where is this in my body right now? What decision or situation or dynamic happened before this feeling came up in my body? And then what is my not self theme asking me to look at right now? Where is it pointing to? Where am I being asked to pivot or redirect or reassess? And this really is a quick process. I mean, we're kind of going through it in a more drawn out way for our purposes of this episode, but this really is a quick process because the thing is, once you get comfortable being in your body, once you're used to it, once it's familiar to you, and once you're familiar with feeling that not self theme when it shows up and how it shows up, how it feels in the body, this is like a quick 2-minute thing that happens in the moment. Okay, where is it? Where do I feel this in my body? What caused me to feel this? Like what just happened that caused me to feel this? Sometimes it takes a second to kind of trace it back. And then what is it asking me to look at right now? Where am I being asked to pivot, redirect, reassess? Where am I being asked to look? And I want to say this as a little caveat to that question number 2 about kind of what happened, like what caused this feeling to happen. Sometimes it's like, oh, I know this exact thing happened and that's what made me feel this way. But sometimes it's like a chain of events and there's 20 things that happened that led up to this point. The most important thing is where you're feeling in your body and what it's being asked, what it's asking of you. Where am I being asked to pivot, redirect? Was it pointing to? And all of this little process here, this is the difference between just processing the emotion and following it. The not self theme is kind of the arrow. It again, with the compass metaphor here we're going with, this is kind of pointing you to follow. Where is it being at? Where is it leading me? Where is it guiding me? Where is it asking me to go? Because processing it is one thing and that's fine. But if we're using this as a diagnostic tool, as our compass, it's going to direct you where to go. So we want to ask it. We want to pose some questions to ask what it's telling you. And so you can use tools. There's other tools you can use to work with this. You can sit with it in meditation. You can use breath work. Journaling is a really good practice. I'm a huge fan of journaling. Journaling, especially as integration after you've kind of dove into these questions and understanding it. And then you can go to this process, this kind of breadcrumb trail, if you will, and using the not self of this breadcrumb trail that goes back to the original conditioning wound. And so if your not self theme is the signal, so if it's the frustration or the anger, the bitterness, the disappointment, if that's the signal and you can follow it back, then you can ask yourself, what did I agree to that wasn't mine to carry Whose voice am I hearing? That's not mine. What did I believe I had to do to be loved, worthy, safe, quote, enough? You can trace it back to those undefined centers in the body. So a few examples here. If you have an undefined heart center, your frustration or your bitterness, your not self theme could be around proving your worth or overcommitting or saying yes to things that really don't feel good to you. And so that frustration, the bitterness, the anger, the disappointment, that's what shows up when you're out of alignment in your heart center, your undefined heart center. And you've experienced that before, right? Especially around proving your worth. We've talked about that before. Your not self theme is going to show up around that. You're going to end up feeling bitter about the proving and the constant doing. You're going to feel the frustration or the impatience. You're going to feel all those things. If you have an undefined solar plexus, your emotional solar plexus, that not self theme is going to show up when there's this trail of emotional enmeshment, when you have not been able to separate your emotions from other people's, when you're absorbing other people's moods, or you're in that chronic people pleasing state. 100% it's going to show up in your not self theme. You're going to feel that frustration. It might show up as resentment, right? Which is, I think bitterness and resentment are kind of on the same playing field there. It's going to show up as maybe it's anger, but your not self theme will show up there. If you have an undefined throat center, maybe you're speaking when you shouldn't or staying silent when you should have spoken up and said something that was your truth. And when you don't, you're going to feel the frustration, the bitterness, the disappointment. You're going to feel your not self theme is going to show up. So do you see how it shows up with these undefined centers? So this is that breadcrumb trail I was talking about, kind of following it back to our undefined centers and where the conditioning is showing up. And if you haven't done my hijacked workshop, I highly recommend diving into it. It's along the lines of everything we're talking about here. It's just really how to work with your undefined centers, how to recognize the conditioning and how it shows up, because so often the conditioning isn't really blatant. It's not something that really jumps out at us as conditioning because it's the way we've been operating for a really long time. And it's just, we think in our minds, it's like, well, this is who I am. This is me. This is how I operate. And so often we're literally operating in the conditioned ways of being 24/7. And so the hijack workshop is going to take you through this to understand like the sneaky ways it's going to show up in your undefined centers. And then you can work with this, because going back to originally what we're talking about, the not self theme, when we are chronically in our not self theme and we can't get out of it, that's when all of the physical things start showing up in the body, where chronic dis-ease shows up in the body. So working with your undefined centers is so crucial to this, and really it's the perfect pairing to understanding how you're not self-theme, like just understanding everything about your not self-theme when we're looking at undefined center. So I'll put the link in the show notes, but I wanted to mention that because that's really a good little accompaniment to what we're talking about here. So when you understand your not self-theme, you understand kind of how to work with this breadcrumb trail that takes you back to the original conditioning wound that caused the not self-theme to show itself. You have this real-time opportunity to go into exactly where the conditioning took root and to work with it in real time. Like this is where the work, the really deep work, where the real transformational work begins, when you're able to do this in real time. And this does take time. Like this isn't something usually that happens right out of the gate. No, it might, but I feel like when we're jumping into human design, this is something that it takes time for us to recognize. If you're not used to being in your body, if you're someone who's really in tune with their body, it might come easier to you. But so many women, this is like a novel concept. Just being in your body is a novel concept, and listening and understanding. Because as I've talked about so often on the show, when you learn the language of the body, so many different things are going to reveal itself. And this is just another opportunity for you to learn the language of your body. Learning your not self theme is another part of this. It's like when you're learning, the conjugations and all of that in another language is always, it's always the tricky part. This is like another one of those pieces you're learning, the language of the body. It's your not self theme, how it shows up, where it shows up, and then you to be able to trace that back to these conditioning wounds in your undefined centers. And this is something that we can use forever as this pattern recognition over time. And if you can add this into a daily practice of when you're doing your journaling or your meditation, especially, I feel like I'm going to keep saying this because I feel like it's just so important to start a regular journaling practice. And I know I'm not one for really prescriptive things for people like everybody should do this, but I feel like I want to say everybody should be journaling. And I know for some people it's so outside of the box for them, or it's so just not, like it doesn't feel like an intuitive thing for them. But I can tell you that Maybe I'll do a whole episode on journaling because this keeps coming up in episodes, but there's just so much that comes out of a journaling practice that doesn't come from any other practice. And your intuition and your soul will speak through your pen on paper in such a different way. And I say that because if you can kind of tie in a not self journal, if you will, a not self journal practice, you can start to see pattern recognition with this. And so you'll be able to notice the trigger. You'll be able to notice your body sensation, the decision or the action that you took that preceded it, that made the not self theme show up. And then you'll be able to do that little breadcrumb practice I was talking about. So you'll be able to go back to the center, your energy center that was likely involved in this. And so jotting these things down, or even if it's like, you can keep notes in your phone, I guess, but jotting these things down, the patterns are always, there's so much data, there's so much information in pattern recognition. And the patterns that come up over the course of time, if you could do this for 3-4 weeks and you start to see the patterns, those patterns become your healing protocol, your healing curriculum. Because now you can go from reaction in real time to recognition in real time. And so you can catch the not self theme when it happens. You can catch it earlier and catch it where you don't get stuck in it. So that it's like a split second check-in and a split second process, the process I walked you through earlier, that happens in a matter of a couple minutes, so that you don't get sucked in and dragged down into it and stay there. And this practice, all of this that we're talking about with the not self theme, this requires a lot of self-awareness, and it also requires a lot of self-compassion. Because I don't want you to make it that you're not self-theme, like there's something wrong with you because you're feeling you're not self-theme, or there's something, you're doing something wrong or bad, or because, as I said, it's a diagnostic, it's a compass. So it is literally just telling you, giving you an indication where you're off, where you've missed the mark, where you're out of alignment. It is not telling you that you've messed it all up, and it's not that. It is just telling you where something is off in your alignment, which all of it is just information. We don't need to attach judgment or stories or anything like that. Can we meet it with compassion, and can we meet with curiosity? I have a whole episode I did earlier this year on curiosity. Can we just bring curiosity into it and check in like, where did this not self theme show up? What decision did I just make that made my not self theme show up? And what is it asking of me now? Where am I out of alignment? Because the other thing I want to mention is we're also not trying to eliminate your not self theme. That's impossible. Plus, we don't want to eliminate the not self theme. We want to have that compass to recognize where we're off. It's not about getting rid of it or even quieting it. I don't want to quiet it either, because I want to know where I've missed the mark, where I'm off. It is really just getting fluent in it. Going back to my metaphor about learning the language of the body, the people who have learned to work with this the best are just fluent in it. They're fluent in what it's telling them. They're fluent in what it means. And so you don't have to wonder and guess like, God, why do I feel so off? Because that's the thing. When we're not fluent and we don't understand how to work with it, we just feel off. And I know that's a very vague way of describing things, but you know what I'm talking about. When your body feels off, your energy feels off, what you're doing feels off, even when you're doing things that used to feel good, like things you're doing in your business or in your life or in your household, or the way you're doing things, like it just feels off. Something feels off. And that's when we get stuck in this feeling off. Then we start to tell ourselves stories and we start to make up stuff. Our little ego minds start to make up stuff that, well, must be this, it must be this. And we do the what if and the what is it. And rather than, if we feel we understand that in the body, we don't have to just feel off. We can feel the frustration or the anger, or the bitterness, or the disappointment. We feel that specifically. We recognize, okay, that's my not self thing telling me I'm out of alignment. Now you can go through the process I walk you through, asking yourself those questions, kind of doing the breadcrumb trail to your undefined centers, and then you can nip it in the bud right then and there. It's such a beautiful process when we use this as a map and not as something to try to get rid of, or making this shadowy part a bad thing or the enemy, so then we have to get rid of or fix. It's just information. It's just a map to tell us where we've gotten off the trail, off the path. And when we use our not self theme in this way, I find that my clients have such a deeper relationship with themselves, such a deeper experience with their human design and all the other parts of their human design. So it doesn't have to stop here. There's so many other pieces to work with. But it really kind of opens up everything, because once you know this piece, then it's so much easier to understand and embody the other pieces and the other more advanced pieces. When we talk about different parts of your incarnation cross and your digestion and your motivation and all these other pieces, it's just a deeper, richer experience with those, and easier for you to feel in your body those other parts too. So if you want to take this deeper, a few different ways here. Go through the practices I talked about, maybe listen to it again, take some notes, and start this as your own personal practice to work with your not self theme. If you haven't done the Hijack Masterclass, I highly recommend going and checking that out, because it's really going to help you tie this into your undefined center. So that'll be the link in the show notes. If you want a deeper dive into this in conjunction with some other pieces of your human design, grab a human design mini session with me. They're only 30 minutes, super affordable way to get your burning questions answered. And we can dive into this piece or a few other pieces. So that'll be in the show notes as well. And then there's also my body code sessions, which basically helps you identify where your undefined and defined centers are impacting your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual body. So tying together what's going on in your body, all these aspects of your body with your human design, understanding how that shows up in your body. Because that's something I feel like is really helpful for people to kind of put the pieces together in real time. So you're not guessing, like, is this how this shows up in the body? Is this how it shows up in the body? We can do that in this session and put it together so you understand it in a deeper way, in a clear way. And then, of course, if you want to continue the journey and make it an actual journey, there's the Calling and the Awakening, my monthly membership options, where you're in a community and we're going through this process, really just the process of life together. And this is part of what we'll look at here, just going deeper into this work, into your not self theme. And we're going into a lot of other more advanced pieces of your chart too. So if you want to take this deeper and use this as kind of the starting ground for diving deeper into human design, you'll check out those. I'll put those in the show notes. And I'd love to hear your takeaways and your work with your not self theme. So shoot me an email or send me a message on Instagram and let me know what you're working with and what you're noticing and how you're working with your not self theme. I love to hear what you're working on, what you're working with on your journey. I hope this was helpful and supportive for you, and I'll see you next time.